welcome to the show, Sarah Jayne Dunn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Let's go back to the beginning and talk about how it all began.
They came to my mum one day and said, look, there's an audition for Hollyoaks. This opportunity came along and I wanted to take it. For me, that was massive. Like, I was massively out of my comfort zone, being sort of airbrushed within an inch of your life. And did a photo shoot. The people at the helm do not care about the show. It wasn't, right, you've got to look a certain way, but I think you felt it. It wasn't fair. It was never fair. A fake smile and being like, everything's fine, it's gonna be fine, and gritting my teeth. There was this sort of real pressure and expectance for you to do these things, even if you felt really uncomfortable. I know that it's still very toxic. Someone mentioned OnlyFans, I was like, no, I'm willing to take chances. My second month on the platform was better than a year on Hollyoaks. Wow. You pull that down or there will be consequences. That night, it was suddenly all over the press that I'd been fired.
Guys, Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, where today I have got a guest who is an icon of British TV. She's someone who's been on our screens for 25 years as Mandy in Hollyoaks. She's appeared on dozens of magazine covers, but she's now switched things up to become one of the world's biggest OnlyFans creators. So welcome to the show, Sarah Jayne Dunn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. It's great to have you here. A fellow Northerner.
Yes.
Northernish.
Good old Northerners, eh?
Do you still get down to London a lot?
I do. I was just saying, I do it in phases. I'm either here all the time, I've got stuff on back to back to back, or I'm not here at all. And this is one of the occasions I've not been here for a few weeks. So it's quite nice to have a reason to come down.
And have you always been from Cheshire?
I'm from Lee originally, good old Lee. And then I lived in Liverpool for a long time because that's where Hollyoaks is filmed. So I bought my first little apartment there, stayed there for a while after leaving the show the first time. And then I sort of moved to Cheshire, which is where I live now. And then found myself in London for a little bit. I was on tour for quite a while with some theatre jobs. So I was here, there and everywhere, and a bit homeless like you are when you're doing a theatre job, just living in random locations. And then went back to Liverpool, got pregnant, and we moved back to Cheshire. So I've been all over the place.
Well, look, let's go back to the beginning and talk about how it all began. I mean, I often normally ask my guests to talk about their childhood and their aspirations and when they first, knew that they wanted to have a career in X. But, you were already on the screen at 14 years old. So
yeah.
How did it start before then?
So I was obviously still at school at that point. I think what happened, the way that I found myself in the industry, was that I wanted to be, at 12 years old, I was like, I want to be a model. And obviously, at that age, I think I was looking at magazines like Just 17 and smash hits. Exactly. And going, I want to be that pretty girl on the front of that magazine. And so when you're sort of doing your options at high school, I was like, I want to be a model. I'm going to move to London. When I'm 16, I told my mum, she's like, cool, whatever you want to do, that's fine. And because of that, I was quite a shy child. And through that sort of interest, I did a modelling course, just a local sort of modelling course.
What age is this? Is like 12?
So this was 12, yeah. Oh. So I did a couple of them, and I did my first one at 12, which I think my parents were really shocked by because I was very introvert. I was very shy. I was never a performer. I used to sing for my mum and dad, but I would stand at the top of the stairs and make them stand downstairs so they couldn't see me. And then it would take me ages to build up the courage to sing, and then obviously they'd be like, oh, well done, that was amazing, even though it's probably terrible. So I was never that child that was up on stage and performing, and it took a lot. And I think I found my passion for performing in high school. I started doing school productions and got confident and found that I really enjoyed it. And I think that taking myself out of being me and being a different character, that's where I found my confidence. And then with the modelling courses from being 12, they taught you deportment and how to do your hair and makeup and interview techniques, so how to sit nicely in an interview and what to say and what not to say. And actually, I think they were really beneficial for me in terms of moving forward and finding some sort of confidence. And off the back of those, I got an agent, a modelling agent, just a very local. In fact, I think the first ones I had were in Macclesfield, which is sort of where I am now. And then they came to my mum one day and said, look, there's an audition for Hollyoaks. At the time, it was a very new show. It only started in 95. And would Sarah be interested in auditioning? She fits the breakdown. And to my mum's surprise, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. Because again, she was very Sarah wouldn't say boo to a goose. So this isn't something she'll be comfortable doing. And I went along for the audition. I think because I really wanted it. I didn't even watch the show, but I remember walking home from school and seeing like the billboards on the bus stops and seeing like Nick Pickard, who plays Tony, and Jeremy Edwards, who was Kurt, like the original core Hollyoaks cast at the time. I think there's probably only about 10 of them. And just thinking, I want to be a part of this. And back then it wasn't as easy to get into the acting industry or get on TV. Like, I think now it's sort of with the likes of Love Island.
Back in the days when there was probably only 4 channels, wasn't there?
Exactly, possibly 5. But there wasn't the reality TV that there is now. Yeah. I feel like now anyone's got the chance to get on TV, like whether you've got any sort of talent or not, there are opportunities out there. Whereas back then, it was just unheard of. So this opportunity came along and I wanted to take it. And right from the beginning, I was like, it's an experience. If nothing else, it's an experience. And I can say I auditioned for that show.
But that was your first paid gig. You'd not done any other work before that?
I'd done like a couple of modelling gigs and that was it. So that was my first, proper job.
So and how did the audition process work? How many times did you go back? How long did it take?
I had 3 auditions. The first one, there were tons of girls and that was just a general sort of chat, and they whittled us down. And then the next one, I think there was probably about 5 of us, and that was a bit more in depth, and we got scripts and we were sort of performing. And then the very final one, I remember there were 3 of us left, and it was a whole sort of day of workshopping with one of the directors at the time and the casting director. And again, that was really, for me, that was massive. Like I was massively out of my comfort zone, but I wanted it so badly. And at that point I was like, I'm so close to this now, like literally my chances.
Were you practicing between auditions? Like, I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, I guess it's not like sport, is it, where you can be going back and hammering the gym and eating your broccoli or whatever, but were you doing some more Liverpudlian accents?
Well, no, I wasn't. I mean, I sort of got through each round and was like, wow, that was a really fun experience. I'm probably never going to hear anything, but I can always, one day tell my children, oh, mummy nearly got on TV once. And I put it to one side. So every time I got recalled, I was in as much shock as everyone else. And then I remember very vividly the day that I got the part. My mum came, I think I was in my bedroom. I was just doing some homework or reading or doing something. And she came in and I looked at her and I knew, and she was like, I just had a phone call. I was like, she was like, you got the part. And it was huge. Like, that was huge. And
I mean, was it like, you're jumping, like what you see on the TV, you're jumping around the room, you're super excited?
I think I cried. I think my mum gave me a big cuddle, and I was only contracted for 2 episodes.
Oh, is that all it was?
So that's all it was. So I went in and I filmed my 2 episodes. And at the end of those 2 episodes, I got a picture, Polaroids, because it was all Polaroids then. I got Polaroids with everyone. I got everyone to sign their autograph for me. And I made this like frame like you did in the 90s, where I put all these Polaroids in and I put the things in, and I put a big picture of like the Hollyoaks cast at the time in the middle, and I put it up on my bedroom wall. And I remember getting these pictures, and at the time the guy that eventually played my brother, he was like, you'll be coming back. And I was like, no, I'm only contracted for 2 episodes. He was like, but you're playing my sister and I'm a regular character in the show, so you'll definitely be back. And I was like, I don't think so. And then obviously it went on and on and on.
and what did you get paid as a 14-year-old?
So you're a minor at that age. Oh God, I think it was something like £160 an episode.
But
something like that.
And in terms of time commitment, what did you do with school? Did you have to kind of stop school, or could you juggle it?
So at the time when I started the show, it was only on screen once a week. So the filming schedule was pretty tame. And obviously, because I was a minor, I wasn't in as much. I wasn't one of the main characters at that point. So I just worked it around school. School were really understanding. My mum was great. I luckily had friends at high school that would take notes for me for any classes that I missed. And then again, because I wanted it so badly, one of the conditions that my mum set was that you have to keep up with your schoolwork, obviously. And if that starts to drop, then that's priority. So the show, that goes. And so because I'd been given that, I worked so hard. So I spent from being 14 to 16 and leaving school, obviously GCSEs were in there as well. I worked so hard, and I got busier and busier as I continued on the show, because I did become a main character and was given big storylines.
And how long did it take to go from, bit part to main character to, the show being more frequent than once a week?
It was pretty quick. I think I was given my first big storyline, which was so Mandy's father abused her, and that was a really big, significant storyline at the time. And I think I did that when I was 15, because I remember obviously the company being very conscious of the storyline that I was playing. My mum chaperoned me, so she was there all the time overseeing what I was doing. And I think then the show, it gradually increased. So it went from 1 day a week to 2 days a week and so on. And it's still like 5 days a week now.
How do they behave with you, in terms of cotton wooling you for that kind of storyline? Because I guess, you've got to be fully exposed to it. But, it obviously wasn't such a, I don't know what the right word is, but in the mid-90s, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now for care and responsibility and duty, etc. I presume even back then that they were still wanting to make sure that you were treated in the right way.
Yeah, to be fair, they were very good. And I was lucky in that the actor that was playing my father was very conscious of the role that he was playing as well. And we would talk through everything first, and they would talk through the storylines with my mom, and she would be on set, and everyone was making sure that I was comfortable with what we were doing. And also it was a pre-watershed show as well. So, there was never any sort of more explicit content. It sort of got to a point, and then obviously that's where you get your big bum tish at the end of the episode. So I think at that point I was very grateful that I'd been given the opportunity to play such an important storyline, and that they trusted me enough to give me a big storyline. And it was really important for my character moving forward. I mean, that sort of carried her through.
Did your dad stay with the show as well?
The guy playing,
yeah,
he did for a little while, and they carried that storyline out, and it had sort of a resolution. And
what's the resolution to abusing your daughter?
Well, I remember there was a big scene on a cliff somewhere. I think we were in North Wales, like Queensferry or somewhere, and Mandy sort of had her last rites. I think his character ended up dying, and she got sort of poured her heart out, and obviously there's no resolution, but you know what I mean. I think she managed to have her closing piece and say how she felt, and say you don't,
metaphorically push him off the cliff.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the actor that played your dad, was he a mentor to you back then?
Yeah, he was great. He was lovely. God rest, like he's passed away unfortunately, but he was an incredible actor, and yeah, great to work with. And I'm glad that it was him playing that role. And I think, he obviously, it was a horrible role to play. And
I mean, what a gig! It's like worse than being a traffic warden.
Yeah, and I think people think that soaps are real, don't they? So he would get abuse in the street from people saying horrible things to him, thinking that character was real. People don't seem to be able to see, reality and not reality.
Any other storylines that you were particularly proud of or excited with?
The other one that really stands out for me was the storyline with Nick Pickard, who I love, who was Mandy's husband for a long time. So Mandy and Tony were sort of a duo for...
Is that the guy we were talking about earlier that's the longest standing character?
Yeah, so Nick's been there since day one and is still there. And he's the Ken Barlow of Hollyoaks, basically. If they get rid of him, the show is just not worth anything. And we had a storyline where we had a baby, and then our baby died of cot death. And that again was a really brave storyline, I think, for the show to do. It hadn't been covered before. It was a challenging one for me because at that time I didn't have any children. I'd never been pregnant. I was still quite young, so I was never maternal either. So for me to sort of get into that zone where you put yourself in this place, and I mean, you can never get into a mindset of someone that has been through something so devastating, obviously. So to try and portray that was really challenging. But to do it with Nick was great because he's a brilliant actor and he's a lovely guy, and I loved working with Nick, so it was really nice to do that with him.
And what goes on behind the scenes in terms of turnaround times and when do you get the script? How many times do you practice? Because I think as the audience, we always hear the big differences between TV and movies and particularly soap type shows.
It is crazy fast. The only thing that I've done that's quicker was Doctors, and I remember doing a few episodes on Doctors, and we had one day where we had 26 scenes to film.
Wow.
And I literally, you don't, at Hollyoaks you got a little bit of rehearsal time, so you would get your scripts maybe, if you're lucky, a couple of weeks before, but what would happen is that you would get amendments right up until the day before, so there was never any point learning your lines any sooner than the night before, which I was very good at doing, but some people that you need more time. Some people need a few weeks to go through things. And you would get, big amendments. Even on the day, someone would come in and go, oh, there's been an amendment to that line now. So even when you've learnt it, they might go, we're not doing that anymore, or we're changing that, or, we've lost that line. So you've got to be on it. You've got to be switched on, and you've got to be able to adapt. And then in terms of rehearsals, you do a line run, which means you just run your lines with everybody. Then you block it, which means you sort of go, right, the director will go, we're going to start over here, and then you're going to move over here. And sometimes it would be organic. Sometimes the director would have very specific ideas of where they wanted you to be and to turn and at what point. And then you would start putting it on camera, because there wasn't, you might have 12 scenes to shoot that day, and they have to stick to that schedule to get everything in and on screen on time.
Did you have any particular strategies for learning your lines?
I think I just got very good at it because I'd done it from being so young. I've now got quite a photogenic memory, so I can now look at lines and at scripts and it will go in pretty quickly. However, my thing is that once I've learned it goes out really quickly as well. I've got a great short-term memory, but because I'm so used to learning something, doing it, and then going, right, I never need to remember that.
Do you think it was easier to learn because you enjoyed it? I'm trying to think of comparables for my audience who might be business owners or employees who need to learn something, or kids at school learning for the GCSEs, who always struggle to take it in. But do you think it was easier for you because it was a topic that you loved?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I was always very professional, so I always carried through that I want to do a good job. I want to work hard. I want to be seen as a good employee. So I would never, there were some people that would turn up to set and hadn't even learned their scripts. And for me, that's unprofessional. Why would you do that? You're being paid to do a job, and surely, it's only you that's going to look stupid when you go on screen. Possibly. Naming no names. But then also it's not fair then on the other artists, because you then have to carry those other people. If you're working with someone and they've not learned their lines and they're tripping up, or you're having to go again and again, that's not fair on anyone around you, anyone that is working hard on that set.
Was it not tolerated well, by directors and production? If you were messing around with your lines and stuff, could you face the axe quickly?
I'd love to say that it wasn't tolerated, but unfortunately it sort of was. And I've sort of come away and I've seen and it's frustrating, because I've seen people that in my eyes aren't professional and would let other people down and wouldn't work hard. And I've seen them go on to do other jobs or to do really well. And I just think that for me, you should get rewarded for working hard, right? You should get rewarded for being professional. And when I see people that don't do that and then still do well, I find that really frustrating. Really frustrating. So I'd love to say it wasn't tolerated, and people, would get a slap on the wrist, but then they would sort of get away with it. But then when you were working hard, there was no reward and no thanks, and sort of differentiation between the who are hardworking and the not hardworking.
Any particular embarrassing or funny stories that from having to learn things quick and fast turnarounds and stuff? Any funny behind the scenes stories?
I think probably just, I don't know about funny stories. I've got funny stories in terms of
it can be horrible if it's not funny.
Gone wrong. Horrible stories. Or I think people just sort of getting things wrong is it's just embarrassing, isn't it? I think. Or just getting people's names wrong, or not really understanding the storylines, or not understanding the characters, or you can see when people haven't put the work in.
I've just been recording this morning with a rugby player, and I had a few sports guys on the show before, and we often talk about changing room camaraderie and stuff. Do you get that same bond and camaraderie as actors on a soap opera that you would in a rugby changing room or a football changing room?
Yeah, absolutely. With the people that you work with a lot, 100%, because you spend more time with those people than you do with your own family. If you're busy on a show, you'll be in from 7:30, if not earlier, and you'll be working 12 hours with those people, cast and crew. So they, especially you will film with a certain crew to film certain episodes. And when you get the dream team crew, you can walk on and you can go, oh my God, I love this camera operator. I love this DOP. I love this makeup artist. I love everyone that's on this set. I love the people that I'm working with. And that can really make an amazing, it's the energy, isn't it? And that sort of, you walk onto set and you know that you're going to have fun and it's going to be exciting. But on the flip side of that, you can walk onto a set and go, oh, I've got the worst director and an actor that doesn't know his lines, and my makeup's not great today, and that can have a real devastating effect on your sort of enjoyment of the production and the outcome ultimately.
If you walk onto one of those bad days, is there much that you can do to change the vibe?
No, not really. I think I spent a lot of my time sort of like plastering on like a fake bravado, a fake smile, and being like, everything's fine, it's gonna be fine, and gritting my teeth. And then my poor husband or my parents, when I was, younger and still living at home, would get the brunt of that at the end of the day when I come home and go, oh God, today, I can't even tell you all the frustration that you'd get.
Did you not go and moan with the other cast or other members of crew, like, the ones of you that were kind of, let's say, bonded over
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, and I've still got, amazing friends there, cast and crew, that we would like literally sit to one side and be like, oh my God. Like, but people, I heard about a camera operator getting caught out. So this is what, since I left, but there was a director who wasn't very good, quite new, I don't think had really worked on stuff before. And the camera operator said something aside, some sort of dig, and didn't realise that there was a mic and she had her cans on and she could hear him, and then he got pulled up and got reprimanded. And so you've got to be really careful sort of what you say, and ultimately you are working as a team, aren't you? So when there are people that aren't quite so sort of up to scratch, what the place was really good for was sort of, geeing everyone up and going, right, okay, so say you didn't have a great director, your first director would almost take that role on and be like, right, well, have you thought about doing this? And what about this? And us as cast were always much more on the lines and the storylines than the writers ever were. And so we would sort of pick up things in the script. I go, actually, Mandy, wouldn't ever say that, or wouldn't say that like that. Or there was, they always got the relationships wrong. So like my character was stepsister with another character, and they would say we were sisters, or they wouldn't even say we were related. And so we were constantly picking up things like that.
And you'd be able to have a lot of input, would you?
Yeah, I mean, not as much as I think it needed, really. I mean, I think they miss an opportunity there by not sitting down with the cast and not sitting down with the crew and not sort of having brainstorming sessions. When I first started, and when it was one show a week, and it was, obviously we had much more time, we used to do a weekly read through of the scripts. So we'd, on a Thursday evening, once we finished filming, we'd go and all sit together and we'd read the scripts. And it was great because it was an opportunity to hear the whole, to keep up to speed with what was going on in the show, but to hear the dialogue and to pick anything up at that point and go, ooh, this doesn't sit right. Or hang on a minute, I think you've forgotten the relationship between these characters or the history between these characters. Then that could be amended before you got on set. Because what happened by the time I left was that you'd get on set and there'd be big discrepancies because there hadn't been time to sort of change things, or you'd get amends that morning. And then you'd have to stand down for an hour while it was sorted out. So a lot of time was lost.
I mean, was it a battle of quality over quantity?
Quantity over quality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a big like a fast turnaround. And I think there's a lack of, the people at the helm do not care about the show. And it's such a shame because the people working on the show do care and want it to be something. And I think for the sake of the audience, it's been going a long time, and it would be a shame to see it go, because there are a lot of dedicated people that loved it, and it's very nostalgic for people. I think what I get, because I was in it right at the beginning, people will recognize me.
Do you still watch it?
I don't still watch it, no. But people will recognise me and be like, oh my God, I loved it. I loved watching it. People always talk about the Hollyoaks Omnibus because it was on a Sunday morning, and students would watch it, after being out all night on a Saturday with a hangover. And it was on, do you remember T4?
Yeah.
So T4 was like a really big thing. And
you used to get the omnibus, didn't you?
So that was it.
I used to watch Hollyoaks nights.
Yeah, and then there were the random late episodes. And yeah, I think there's a nostalgia, and I don't think that they play to that,
So those people at the top that you say don't care about the show, I mean, what do they care about?
You tell me. I think they're
just a job, their own paycheck.
I think they're just told to sort of get it turned around, and at whatever sort of consequence that is.
And do some shows, do shows have good and bad reps? Like Hollyoaks is a happy place to be. EastEnders is totally toxic. I mean, is there inherent vibes that differ from show to show?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can only speak from experience on shows that I've worked on. But for example, I worked on Casualty for a while, and it was a completely different kettle of fish. So at Hollyoaks, the schedule is chaos, and you never know where you're at, and you're sort of on call basically 7 days a week, and you're not supposed to work weekends, but they work weekends. And it's really hard when you've got a child, especially, and that's what I found going back with having a child. It's really hard to sort of know where you're at, to schedule anything, and even like doctor's appointments or dentist appointments. It's silly things like hair appointments, but you need to keep those things up because part of your being on the show is your appearance and continuity and things like that. I worked on Casualty and they were all over it. And that's another show that, has been running a long, long time and is an ongoing drama. They had the scheduling board up for like 3 weeks. Nothing changed. Everyone knew where they were. You got called in at a certain time and you were on set when you were supposed to be on set. It was so professional and so different, and you felt valued and you felt like people wanted you to be there and people were grateful that you were there and that everyone was working together and that you were all in it together. And for me, coming from Hollyoaks and then going to that, I was like, whoa, hang on. And I think because all I'd known was Hollyoaks, it blew my mind that there was somewhere that actually this is how it could be. And this is so lovely. And I'm looking forward to going to work and finish when I'm supposed to finish. And I know that I'm off tomorrow, but I know that I'm in next week. And, I was working in Cardiff for that. And it was so I was away from home, but it was great.
When you talk about hair appointments, etc., I mean, was there a lot of pressure put on you to maintain an appearance?
I think the pressure didn't come from the show. The pressure just came from media, magazines. I think, especially in the 90s and noughties, when, you were sort of airbrushed within an inch of your life if you did a photo shoot, or you were pitted against other girls. Like, for example, there would always be, at the soap awards, there'd be the best dressed, worst dressed. Like, how is that a thing? You were picked apart. You couldn't do wrong for doing right. And so I think the pressure came from that rather than the show. I think in terms of the show, obviously because it was always known as the sexy soap. And again, we were sort of, as the girls were sort of pitted against each other, it wasn't right, you've got to look a certain way, but I think you felt it. Because if you didn't, then someone else is going to get those gigs, or someone else is... I was
going to say, what would happen if you didn't look your best? But it was just really as simply as you might not get booked.
You might not get, that magazine shoot, or you might not get chosen to go to that awards. So the people that picked up the most press would ultimately, and it still stands to this day, would ultimately get picked to go and represent the show at events.
Was there much jealousy between people who, were more of a fate, so somebody's getting picked for more events and more representation than the next person? I mean, was there much bitchiness and jealousy?
Not between the people. I think... Because we sort of always said, and I'd have these conversations with people, if it's you being chosen for all these things, then of course you're going to accept them. Of course you're going to do them. And I would never begrudge someone of that. Because if it was me, of course I'd go to those things. Of course I'd take those opportunities. I think the jealousy and the bitterness again came then back to the company, because there was no sort of, it wasn't fair. It was never fair. And you were, again, never sort of acknowledged or appreciated or rewarded for working hard or for doing your best. And, the show's supposedly all about being diverse, but then when it comes to events and awards and stuff, you see the same people over and over again. So,
did you get extra money or anything for these? For being in a magazine or going to an awards ceremony, representing the show in any way?
You didn't get paid for any of those things. What you get paid for is like brand partnerships, but then the company take a cut of that, and it's something that they would specifically organise. Yeah, but for magazines and events and things, that's not something that we would ever really see any money for.
Okay, so you left Hollyoaks.
Yes.
You've left it multiple times over the years. I mean, what sparked those leavings? Was that just you fancying a change elsewhere, or was the character getting a bit boring at that particular point?
So the first time I left, I was 24. So I'd been in the show 10 years, and for me, that was my decision. I wanted to leave. I wanted to see what the reality of being in the industry was, because I knew that my reality wasn't what being an actor was. It's very, very, it's not common to basically get a recurring role with recurring pay and all these opportunities. Like, that doesn't happen. As an actor, you're normally in work for a little bit, you'll get a bit of money that then has to last you to your next job, and you don't know when your next job's coming, and you don't know what that's going to be, and you don't know where you're going to be, and you sort of have to take whatever you're offered. So I wanted to leave and see if it was for me. I was 24 years old. I'd played this character for so long. I also sort of wanted to go, who am I? Because all I'd sort of known was her.
But did it not worry you? Like, I guess you're saying it's not normal to have that regular paycheck, but it's not normal. But it must also be, fantastically reassuring that that the mortgage is getting paid, the bills are getting paid. I mean, did it not worry you that could be your last acting gig? Because I would imagine as well around that time, so many people leave soap and go, I'm going to go work in Hollywood, and we never see them ever again.
Yeah, and I'd seen that. I'd seen lots of people sort of leave the show and go, I'm going doing this, I'm going to do this, and sort of with massive egos leaving thinking they were going to be the next sort of Brad Pitt and I did see that, and so I knew that was a possibility. I went with that completely in mind, but I was in a soap, you're not secure anyway. So although I'd been very lucky and I'd been there for 10 years and I'd been there regularly and I'd worked and I'd been in a lot of episodes, they still could have at any point gone, right, we're done with this character now. Like, she's off, see you later. So it was almost reassuring for me to make that decision and for them not to have that control. Like, it meant that it was my choice. And if it went tits up, well, I only had myself to blame. And I was in a nice position that at that age, I had my, I'd bought a property. And again, I got my first property when I was 18, and I had all my friends around me that would never be, we're not in that position. So I had a property, I had some financial, stability behind me. I wasn't leaving. I knew that if I didn't work for a while, I was okay, basically. And so I went and made the leap with that in mind. And then I was also fortunate that the show didn't kill my character off. So I sort of, when I knew that I was leaving, I knew that there'd be an opportunity to possibly go back. So I was sort of jumping, but with a bit of a lifeline still.
Did you have a backup plan? I mean, I know you say you had some financial ability to to weather a storm, but if the acting hadn't have worked out elsewhere, were you prepared for the fact that you would be entering civilian life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've had that as well. Like I left when I was 24 and I worked. I got a job straight away in theatre and I did my first theatre show and it was a great job and I loved it. And then I worked for quite some time. And then I went back to Hollyoaks, I think, for a few episodes and then left again. And then I did have a quiet time, which I knew would come because, unless you're sort of up there actor that's in demand and, who's constantly working, like Sheridan Smith, someone like that literally goes from job to job to job to job. And at that point, I was like, right, okay. So I trained as a makeup artist. It's something that I was always interested in. I always enjoyed having my makeup done. I always enjoyed doing my makeup for events and things. So I trained, I moved down to London for a bit and I moved in with a friend. And I did that and I started doing bridal makeup. I started doing brows and lashes. I set up my own little business and I would travel around London with my little case and do jobs. And so I did that for a while.
How was your ego about it?
Fine. I think, do you know what? I've got a really grounded family. Like, I've got no one else that's in this industry. Like, my mum was a bookkeeper. My dad was a police officer. My brothers have got normal jobs. Like, I'm the only one. So I've never sort of come into this. I think because I've always sort of gone, oh my gosh, I've been given this opportunity and I've always been very grateful for it. I've never expected anything from it. I've never thought, well, this is it now. I'm made. Yeah, my ego was fine. It was fine. And actually, it was really sort of nice to do something normal and then I'd be working with people and, doing someone's makeup. They'd be like, oh my God, we used to watch you on Hollyoaks.
Well,
and we loved
I was going to
it.
say, your ego was fine, but did you find like strange reactions from your clients? Like, why is Mandy doing my makeup? Like, what's gone wrong?
Yeah, I think people were like, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, why not? Like, I need to work. I've still got bills. I've got overheads. I still, want to be able to do nice things. So why not? And also, I think because I've worked from being so young, I can't not work now. I find it really hard to sit still and do nothing. Lockdown for me was so difficult because, like all of us, no one knew what was happening. I didn't know when I'd be going back to work. I didn't know if I'd have a job to go back to. At the time, I was still on Hollyoaks, but no one knew what was going on. I didn't know what money was coming in, and I couldn't sit still. So even in lockdown, I did a sort of podcast on my Instagram, because I was like, I need to do something. I need to be proactive. Yeah, so it was sort of nice to have that and go, actually, I can do this, and I don't have to rely on the acting industry because it is so difficult. It's an impossible industry to be in. So to have a backup actually made me feel really reassured.
I mean, you mentioned that you bought your first house at 18 and
Yeah.
you've obviously had some money around you to fall back onto during the quiet periods. Did you have any particular financial advice at that time? You know, did the show help you? Did your parents help you? Or were you just a sensible not spender?
Oh no, I'm a spender.
Okay.
I spent silly when I was, working a lot and I had no responsibilities. I would, buy silly handbags and things like that. But actually now I have zero regrets of those things, because I sort of think, I was an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. I was living the dream, really. I was doing a job that I loved. I had money coming in. I had my own property. I'd moved out of home. I was able to go out a lot. Like I always say, my experience of that time sort of like being at uni, but with money, because I was going out, I was having the best time. So the sort of buying the property came from my mum and dad. Thank goodness. They were like, right, you've got some money, let's invest it. And I invested at a really good time at that point. And then I invested again, and I invested at a really bad time.
In another property?
Yeah, so I bought a buy-to-let, and then everything crashed. So that was a really bad investment. But you live and you learn, don't you? I say it was a bad investment. I've got zero regrets. It felt right at the time. I wish that I'd bought in London at the time. That probably would have been the better thing to do. But at the time, I had no interest in being down here. And you sort of live and learn with those things, don't you? I think I had an investment like broker, a financial advisor that I spoke to as well. And again, made a few investments. They didn't really go to plan. So I've lost money over the years. But again, I sort of feel like that's part of life, isn't it? You live and you learn. And if I hadn't have done those things, or if I hadn't have invested, then who's to say I'd be in a better situation anyway? I
mean, you're clearly hardworking, but do you consider yourself entrepreneurial as well?
I didn't. And now I obviously, with everything that's gone on in the last 2 years, I think I'm more of a businesswoman than I actually gave myself credit for. I think I'm braver as well than I give myself credit for. I'm willing to take chances. And I don't know whether that's through stupidity or naivety or what, but it's touch wood. It's always sort of worked for me. My mum always takes the piss. She's always like, you could land in shit and still come out smelling of roses. She's like, I don't know how you do it, but things always seem to, again, touch wood, always seem to go your way. And I think that is because I got a positive attitude. I try and see the best in everything. I try and believe that, everything for a reason, and whatever's meant to be will be, without sort of getting spiritual and stuff. I do believe in putting out there, what you want. But obviously alongside that, you've got to work hard, and you've got to make your own path for those things as well.
So let's talk a bit about mental health, which is obviously very topical now. I mean, probably not so much in the mid 90s, but I mean, how did you find your mental health affected, or maybe some of those around you, if not you, with the likes of the pressure from the show, appearing on the covers of major magazines, and I guess just other glamorizing pressures that that must have surrounded the industry?
I didn't realise it at the time how much it had sort of affected me and affected other people. There was a lot of pressure put on us, and there was a lot of sort of expectations, and there was no care package put in place, if you like. I remember shooting calendars, photo shoots with the girls for the show, and some of the girls being really upset, not wanting to do the shoot, not wanting to be there.
Because unhappy with
feeling
their appearance,
uncomfortable,
whatever,
feeling uncomfortable and feeling the pressure, like, because those things were expected of us. And I remember one year, a couple of girls going, I don't want to be part of this, and then being told, well, you're, it's part of your contract, you do these things, and them going, but we're not models, like we don't want to do that. We came into this because we're actors, and we want to do the show, and we love the show, but we don't want to get in bikinis and be on a beach. And basically there was this back and forward where they were sort of being told that, well, they had to do it. And in the end, they didn't do it, but they were basically told, well, if you don't do that, then you won't be given other opportunities, because we'll sort of go, well, you didn't want to do that, so they're not going to want to do this. So by saying no to something that they felt really uncomfortable with, they were then disregarded for any other sort of shoots, or, whether that be something that they might have loved to have done. It was like, well, they don't want to do that. So you did sort of feel that we were pitted against each other. And I think it was sort of just, you're made to feel disposable. So you're sort of made to feel like, well, if you won't do it, she'll do it, or we'll get someone else in to do it. So there was this sort of real pressure and expectance for you to do these things, even if you felt really uncomfortable or anxious, or it wasn't something that you wanted to do. It's like, well, if I don't do it, someone else will, so I better do it because I don't want to lose my job.
Was there any particular moments of like standout mutiny?
What do you mean? Like
where, you know, a group of you kind of clubbed together and said, fuck it, I am absolutely not doing it? Or was everyone ultimately too scared of losing the next job or losing?
Yeah, I think there wasn't any. No, because the thing is, you could, and we have had this before where we'd had sort of cast meetings, but for that to work, it's like a strike. Everyone has to be in. And so I remember we had a meeting of sort of all of us that had been there a long time, sort of your core cast, if you like.
This is a private meeting.
This was a private meeting, and sort of, you know, saying we weren't happy with X, Y, Z, you know, hours, scheduling, pay, working weekends, because that's something that we were never retain. Like on you, so you're on a retainer, but you're on a retainer Monday to Friday. But then there'd be weekend shoots at weekend after weekend. And when you've got families, you can't, you know, you can't plan anything through the week. Then your weekend is, you know, absolutely precious. So if you then can't plan anything, then what are you supposed to do? And the problem that we had was that, well, even if we go, right, we're not doing this, you've got, the cast is now something like the 60 odd people. Like when I first started, there was maybe 12, if that. So there's so many people. So even if like 10 of you go, well, we're not doing that, there's 50 others that don't want to lose the job, that have maybe just started or that are maybe a year in. They're absolutely loving the opportunity and you know, think that it's a stepping stone to something else. That won't do it.
But do you think, you know, in those situations, do you think if push had have come to shove and, you know, or maybe it did, maybe you've got a story from it, but, you know, if the 10 of you said, you know what, we are gonna stand on, and the producers, I mean, I don't know how they would have taken it, but let's just say they ultimately say, you know what, if that's your attitude, and fine, fuck off, we'll find someone else. Do you think you would have then back down in the end? Because as much as you don't want to do it, you also then do appreciate that you don't know where the next job's coming from.
I don't know, because I don't, you know, we never got to that. I mean, ultimately I sort of got to that and I did go, well, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm not taking it anymore. But off the back of that, other people, and I know people, you know, aren't happy there, and I know it is a toxic place to work.
This is now,
yeah.
And do you find, or do you know that it's maybe a more supportive environment than it was nowadays and back then, or is it still as toxic? Because I guess in today's world, there's so much more said and done about you know, trying to protect employees or whatever, you know, whatever it may be. I mean, have they not improved in any way?
Not that I've heard of. No, and certainly not when I was there. And there was a lot of box ticking. There was a lot of like, oh, you've got to do this course, or you've got to do this, and you've got to learn about this. And so we did a lot of sort of, you know, 2 hours sit in a boardroom and do a course about mental health or diversity or lots of different topics. We were all really, you know, interesting. But then it wasn't ever implemented. So it was sort of like, well, why are we doing these things? Like, if they're not going to then be carried forward, and there's all this talk of, oh, we really care and this is really important to us. But then when push comes to shove and someone raises an issue, it's then not resolved. Then what is the point of all these meetings? So I know that it's still very toxic, and that was one of my reasons when everything did come to a head and I stood my ground, was because I wasn't happy. And I thought, well, why, you know, if I'm here and I'm not happy, then I might as well not be here. And, you know, if it goes tits up, again, sort of like when I was 24, if it goes tits up, well, then it does. And I'll work my way through it. Like, you know, I'll be okay. I know I'll be okay. I've got other strings to my bow. I'll be fine. So that for me is why I sort of went, no. But it's such a shame. And again, it comes back to not caring, because there are people there that have, you know, crew as well, that have been there since day one, that it is their bread and butter, that it's their life, that they live and breathe that show. And for that not to be recognised and acknowledged is really sad. And they're missing out on a trick, because it could be incredible. But I don't know why. I don't know why that's not addressed, and why it's not sort of, why they don't utilise what they have.
Well, look, let's talk major career change then. And obviously when enough became enough, 2021, OnlyFans.
Yeah.
How did it all come about?
So we were post-COVID, weren't we? So we'd had lockdown.
Yeah. Which
I already said I didn't enjoy, because I didn't know what was
just finally on work and COVID. Were you still on a retainer? Were you still getting paid?
So we were we were paid a certain amount per month, and then when we went back to work, that was deducted gradually from our wages.
Oh, it's like a loan.
Yeah. So what we'd been paid was then taken out of our earnings when we went back. So we knew we had something coming in. It wasn't very much, but then that was then redeemed. And yeah, so I hated COVID. I didn't know what was going on. And basically for me, what happened was just before COVID, my storyline, I was about to have a really big storyline. So every year the show do a stunt. And for the first time, I think ever, I was going to be involved in the stunt, and it was going to have massive repercussions for my character. And there was a whole big storyline off the back of it. I was really excited about it. Cue COVID, cue going back to filming. So I think we were off for about 4 months before we returned. Then when we returned, there were very strict protocols in place. Obviously, distancing, masks, no physical contact, obviously. We were all put into isolated dressing rooms, whereas before that we'd shared. We weren't allowed in the green room, which was our communal space. So it was such a weird environment to go back to, because you sort of, from something that had been such a communal sort of, not experience, but a communal environment, to suddenly being isolated and then trying to perform emotional scenes that required contact. Like I went back and my character got married. So I had to do a wedding with literally like the bride and groom with this far apart. You weren't
kissing your husband or anything?
We couldn't even hold hands. So trying to do this emotion, and they would cheat everything so that it looked, then when it went on screen, it looked like you were closer. But ultimately, if you're not, like, you don't have that connection, it's really hard to perform. And I'd have emotional scenes with the girl that played my daughter where I wanted so desperately to like cuddle her, and I couldn't. And so I found it really then had a detrimental effect to the script and the performance, because ultimately you ended up playing it slightly different to how it was supposed to be. And also my storyline changed. So the big storyline that I had,
what was that big stunt that was going to happen?
So Mandy's always been very much about appearance because she was a model, and she was going to, I think there was a firework that was sort of going to backfire, and so she was going to get a big old scar down her neck and shoulder, and then have real like sort of issues with appearance.
This is the real reason you left, isn't it? You didn't want to.
I just didn't want to sit in makeup for 4 hours every morning having a scarf on. No, I was really excited about it. Like for me, and I hadn't been that busy with the show pre-COVID either. I had a busy period during my storyline where my character had an affair, and then it had sort of quietened down. So I was really excited to be doing something that actually meant something and that I could really get into. But yeah, because of that, we couldn't do the stunt when we went back. So there was a lot of things that just couldn't happen. And I went from being, well, I would have been really busy to being really quiet, and really, I feel like my characters just sort of got lost. Like they didn't know what to do. Like this storyline had gone, everything changed. So not only was I going in and the place was a different place to work and it was very isolated, I was going in and I wasn't doing the storyline I was supposed to be doing, and everything changed and no one really knew what was going on, because I think they were all fine, the company were finding their feet with what they could and couldn't do, and the writers were struggling because what can we write where, it's not essential that these characters have contact, and how can we make it real? And through COVID, I'd been trying to think again, sat still going, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Trying to think of different ways that I could bring money in and things that I could do that I could work around my job. So even when I was quiet, like I've said before, you have to be you're essentially on call. So if they ring you and go, such person's phoned in sick, we need you in an hour, you've got to drop everything and you've got to go. So I couldn't do something that one would mean that I was unavailable. You've got to be very careful with what you do because everything's got to be signed off. So I couldn't go, if I knew that I was going to be quiet for 3 weeks and I got offered an episode of an amazing drama, I couldn't go and do that because they wouldn't give me permission because you might be unavailable when you're needed and the show was first priority and rah. So I was trying to think of ways that I could do something for me that would, one, give me something to do when I wasn't busy, and two, might bring in some extra money. So I knew that I had something. And it was a photographer actually that mentioned, it wasn't OnlyFans, but he was like, why are you putting all your images on Instagram? He went, you could be selling those, like you should be getting money for those. He suggested like selling them to tabloids. But you don't, nowadays you get pittance for that. And it's sort of not worth it. So I was like, I just enjoying doing photo shoots. I'd just hit 40. I'd been training really hard. I was feeling really confident. I was sort of getting lovely messages from other women, other mums, other women, over 40, going, you're really inspiring me to be confident and feel my best and sort of fuck what age I am, because that doesn't matter. Like, it's just a number. And so that was really, for me, really motivating and really inspiring to hear that. So I was doing these photo shoots. I was loving them. It came off his comment that I was like, there might be something in this. So I started looking at other platforms to put my content on. And someone mentioned OnlyFans. I was like, no, like, because my instant sort of reaction was what everyone's is, that no, it's porn. So you've got the wrong end of the stick. That's not what I'm thinking. But actually then when I started looking into it, I realized that there's everything on there. You know, it doesn't have to be explicit content. There's sort of guitar lessons on there or yoga classes. And then, you know, you do have full-blown porn on there. Like, it's a platform for everyone to do basically whatever they want. So I looked at OnlyFans. I sort of skirted around that. I went and looked at other platforms like Patreon, and there are other versions of OnlyFans. I looked at setting up my own website that was a subscription, so just my own platform.
And what were you going to put on it? Just sexy pics, or were you going to get juicy?
No, never juicy. I don't do explicit content. So basically the images that I was putting on Instagram were lingerie and bikini. So I always compare it to the lads mags of the noughties. Yep. So FHM,
Nuts, Zoo.
Yeah, not even Nuts, because Nuts was more like your page 3. But yeah, the FHM, the Maxim, like GQ. Not that I ever did GQ, but you know, those sort of mags. Yeah,
like stylized shoots with a bit of a budget.
Yeah, and a bit like, some of them are, you know, a little bit implied. Like the calendars, like one of the first calendars I ever did, and I actually found the picture of it the other day. And I think I must have been 17, 18. And it's me in a pool with bikini bottoms on, this big necklace, and I'm covering my boobs. So I'm basically topless and I'm just covering my boobs. So that's implied. Yep. So so the stuff that I've been doing all my life, basically, but moving it off my Instagram and putting it on OnlyFans. One, so that I could keep my Instagram more. So Instagram is a
funnel.
It's an income revenue, you know. It basically, you can make money off Instagram, right? So, but you have to sort of have your niche, your USP. And for me, it was a bit of a mix mash of everything. I had this conversation with my manager and we were like, well, I tell you what, why don't we move all the sort of sexy images? Not all of them, but like, let's take that content, move that somewhere else so that 1, it's in a different space. 2, if people want it, there's a way of accessing it. And 3, I own the copyright. Because the other thing about Instagram is that you put a picture up, anyone can lift it. So these pictures were being lifted and put on the Daily Star, Daily Mail Online, like with whatever sort of content and quote they wanted to put with it. Which bullshit stories that they run, don't they? It's a story about nothing, basically. It's usually like flashes the flesh or something like that. Literally the same every time. And then I could keep my Instagram more like fitness, beauty, fashion, and parenting, which is like sort of, my Instagram for me is quite organic. I just sort of try and put my life on there. So it was nice to move those away. And then I could work with brands on all that other stuff, which I still do. And so, I had this idea. I looked into the platform. I looked into how it worked. We got a contact at the platform, had a conversation with them. I aired all my concerns with them.
Oh, you can actually talk to a proper person. It's not like a Facebook or an Instagram.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether that's because of I had a profile already. I don't know, if other users, Susan down the road started an account, if she could get hold of them. I don't know. Again, this is just my experience, but my manager was able to get hold of someone and we had conversations. So I was able to sort of really, because I was like, I need to understand this before I jump on there. And I still don't know whether it's for me and how does it work, and had chats with them. Then I had chats with Line Pictures, which they deny, but this happened, and told them what I wanted to. First I emailed and they were like, right, you need to speak to this person. Had a Zoom call with this lady and basically went, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. It won't be explicit content.
Why were you even telling them, just as a courtesy, or is it contractually? Because
so everything has to be run past them. And also I thought, well, again, I didn't want to jeopardize my job. That wasn't what I was doing it for. I didn't want to leave. My intention was never to leave. It was just to have something for me to do. Yeah. And maybe, I didn't even know it was going to make money, but maybe another source of income. And sort of went through those avenues, spoke to them. They were like, right, okay. Obviously their concerns were the same as mine to begin with. And I explained everything to them. And they eventually got back and were like, we're going to okay this internally. We trust you. We know, I've obviously been part of the show for a long time. So that was that. And then I launched, I think just before Halloween on a Friday night. And I thought, right, I did a big Instagram post about it, about why I was doing it, about what my content was going to be. And I launched, and I remember sitting on my sofa in my kitchen and just watching the subscribers going up, watching the money going up and going, what? what? Like, saying to my husband, I was like, you're not gonna believe this. Because, you know, for me, I was like, I might get 1 subscriber. I might get 200. I just didn't know.
Can you tell us some numbers? What was that first month?
I don't talk about figures because I just don't. I never have. Yeah. But it exceeded all expectations.
In relative terms, it was better than a month on Hollyoaks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think my second month on the platform was better than a year on Hollyoaks. Wow. So that's sort of where I was at. But that first week, I knew that I was onto something great. And I was doing nothing different. I was literally shooting the content. Apart from I was shooting some stuff at home. So whereas I've been doing all professional shots to keep on top of like the amount of content that you need for OnlyFans, I self-shoot some stuff as well now. So I do a bit of both. And again, that was my thing with that, was that I can do this like after I finish filming. I can do this of a weekend. I can do this when I'm off work and Stanley's at school. It's my little boy. So it was the perfect thing to work around the show, to not interfere with my filming schedule, to still be on call, to still be doing what I was doing, but just move my content from one platform to another. Did that. Launched it. It was really successful. I went to a wedding that weekend. That was great. I did a podcast the following week with Nat Anderson. A lovely podcast. Everyone was so positive about it.
Was that podcast specifically to talk about the OnlyFans at the time, or did you have it booked in anyway?
That, I think she got me on to sort of chat about that. I mean, we talked about everything, but she was like, this is amazing. I love that you've taken back control. Like I say, everything was really positive. The feedback that I got, there was only a handful of negative feedback. So I was like, this is amazing. Like, I didn't hear anything from work. So I was like, okay, cool. Right. They knew about it. So I hadn't told them specifically when I was launching, but obviously we'd had these conversations. And then I got called in for a meeting the following week. So at this point, the platform had been live just under a week. So in terms of...
Had you been in work during that week?
No, because I was really quiet at the time. So prior to this, I'd had a meeting with the Hollyoaks producer at the time to air my concerns, to sort of go, look, what's going on? I'm not in. I don't know what's going on with my character. I'd been having lots of, like you were saying before, about input. So I'd been getting scripts and they hadn't really been making sense, or it didn't really fit with my character's sort of dialogue. And so I've been having weekly sort of check-ins with some of the producers to sort of talk through any concerns, and they've been great in terms of going, right, okay, well, we can tweak that, and yeah, I understand why that, or this is in because of that, so that needs to stay. So it felt like I'd had much more input. It was great. And then I had a meeting with the producer, which I fought to get. I just couldn't get in with her at all because she was quite new and quite busy. So I fought. I got this meeting eventually, and I went in and aired my concerns and sort of was like, look, I'm not busy. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what direction you're taking my character in. And she was basically like, neither do we. So I was like, right, I just signed a new contract at this point, and contracts were annual. So I was at the beginning of a new contract. So I sort of felt safe in that. I thought, well, I've just signed for another year, so I must be okay. But I'm not in any episodes. I'm not doing anything. All my ties with my character had sort of been cut. Like, she'd left her partner. She'd moved out of her home. A daughter had moved in with someone else. It felt very much like I was being separated.
But you're getting paid during this point, though.
You're getting paid a retainer,
right? So it's a retainer, and then X amount, and every time you appear on an episode.
Yeah, so you sort of get your retainer, and then you get, the busier you are, the better. Basically, you get paid your episodes, and you get paid repeat fees, you get paid production days, you get paid overtime. So you want to be in because that's when you make money. If you're not in, I mean, it's minimal. And yeah, I had this meeting, and I said at the end of the meeting, I went, should I be worried? And she said, I can't answer that question at the moment. So I came out, I literally cried for 3 days after that.
That's a yes.
Exactly. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I went into that meeting for some reassurance. I went in for her to go, look, we're a bit lost at the moment. We're finding our feet, but rest assured, you are important to us. We will, this character, we've got plans. Don't worry. And she basically said, check in again in 3 months. So this is post-COVID, obviously, when money wasn't great anyway, because we'd had this big old lull. And I was like, that's another 3 months of my life where I'm going, what is going on?
But were you feeling a bit more relaxed, as pissed off as you were that they wouldn't talk openly to you or wouldn't make a decision? At this point, you're also now starting to see some zeros clock up from OnlyFans. So
well, I hadn't started OnlyFans at this point, but that for me was of the catalyst. Right. So that's what I mean. I'd had this meeting. I'd already had conversations with them about starting the platform. Then I had this meeting with the producer, and I came out and I literally felt so worthless and so demoralized and just sort of undervalued, I guess. And it comes back to that, like, not caring. Like, I put so much of my life into that character, into that role and into that show. And to sort of go into a meeting like that and be told, we don't know what's going on, and we, you know, this might be the end for you, but we can't tell you, come back in 3 months' time. I was like, and I was unhappy there anyway. So I was like, what am I doing? So I think for me, that was a catalyst to go, right, well, I might as well give this a go. I might as well, because if it doesn't work, and I even have this conversation with my parents. And I remember my dad going, well, what have you got to lose? Like, if it doesn't work, then you're in the same situation as you were before. And if it does work, bingo. So yeah, so I launched it and it did work. And, you know, I could see after that first week that it was the right thing to do. And I felt better. I felt in control. I felt empowered. I felt positive. And I was like, this, you know, with your gut, you know, don't you? And I was like, this is right for me. This feels right. The response has been amazing. And then I got called in for a meeting just under a week later, and they basically gave me an ultimatum, like, you pull that down or there will be consequences. The consequences were never made clear. It was like, you take it down or else.
And what was you feeling there and then? Was there an argument or was it a, you know what, fuck you, I'm ready for this?
There was an argument in that I was like, you give me a clear explanation as to why, because their argument was, it's an over 18s platform. I was like, I know, but my content's not over 18. Okay, so what is the difference between those images being on Instagram and those images being behind a paywall, other than you are not benefiting from that money? What is the difference? It's over 18s. And it just kept coming back to that. And so I was like, well, until you give me a reason, I'm not taking it down, because why would I? Like, and that went on, that was a Thursday, and then that went on, so then we obviously had the weekend, which they were like, you need to think about this. And then on the following Wednesday morning, I got an email that terminated the contract, just like that, with immediate effect. So I didn't even get to go back in to sort of wrap up the storyline or give some closure on the character or say goodbye to people, or, which is fine, because, you know, the people that I'm friends with, I see anyway. But to sort of just cut the cord like that.
And how did they kill your character?
They didn't. She's still floating around in America somewhere.
Okay. So, but when that happened, I guess you probably already made your mind up. You were ready to accept it. And was it still a shock? Were you scared or angry? Did you get a lawyer, or did you think, fuck it, on to chapter 2?
I was obviously pissed off, because it was more the way that they did it, and and I made notes before this meeting that I had, and I found the notes actually the other day, and I was like, so part of the notes were, you're reprimanding me for doing something that I've been contractually bound to do my whole life, right? And the other one was, I'm a 40-year-old woman, you don't own me, I feel worthless, I feel undervalued. Like, all of these are the things that I made the notes on, that I looked back the other day and went, oh my God, like, yes, I 100% made the right decision. That's where I was. And why would you stand for that or settle for that? Like,
do you think it was as simple as they're not happy because they're not earning, or do you think as well it's because I know you're doing no different content to what they'd ask you to do anyway, but do you think it's one rule for us, one rule for them, that they want to try and pretend to be, I don't mean pretend to be family friendly, but you know what I mean, that they can say, well, we're a family show, even though they're pushing you to do stuff they don't want. I mean, was it for them to keep up appearances?
Possibly. Apparently one cast member complained. Love to know who that was. And apparently
that one you knocked back in 1998 at the staff party.
And I think one viewer wrote in. Possibly. I mean, but then the hypocrisy of it, and I flagged this a few months later when there were a couple of the guys on the show, pre-Watershed, with basically implied nudity with their arses out. And I'm like, hang on a minute. So it's okay for the show to do that with men, but for me as a female to do that on my own terms, you're not okay with. I mean, what you tell me what the difference is there? I don't understand that. And again, like, I've pulled out things from over the years where there's been, one of the actresses on the show topless holding 2 melons in front of her tits, and another one where there's a girl stripped off, I think I did one in a swimming pool where I lost my bikini top. It's like, all of that's okay, and it's okay for you to do the late night episodes where again, there was a girl that I was living with and she had to simulate a sex scene on the Hollyoaks later. And she came home from work that night crying her eyes out because the guy she was working with, she felt really uncomfortable with. And there were no, like now I think they have intimacy coordinators on set. There was never any of that when I was in the show younger. So if you had to kiss someone or sort of like be groped by someone, it just happened. And there was no sort of, right, we're going to do this, or is it okay if I do this, or, you know, almost paint by numbers. So you know what's going to happen and there's no shocks and you don't feel uncomfortable. There was none of that. But for them to do that, that's fine. But for me to do this on my own terms is not. And that's where I think because they went to the press, I didn't go to the press. So that night, it was suddenly all over the press that I'd been fired, which I would never go around going, oh my God, I've been sacked, everyone. Like, why would you want that on your CV? But they gave me no choice but to then I had to defend myself because I found myself in the situation where it was everywhere and I didn't anticipate that. You know what I mean? I wasn't intending on leaving the show.
And the person who fired you, what's happened to them since then?
She's just been fired.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What for?
I don't, for not being very good at her job, I think. Right. I think apparently this is according to the press, so take it with a pinch of salt. Apparently the show's viewing figures are the lowest they've ever been and they had to do something about it. So I think her and 2 other producers have been sacked. Does it make you feel happy that she's gone? Or not happy. Gone? I'm not that sort of person, but I do believe in karma. What goes around comes around. And it makes me feel sort of better that she's not there for other people because, you know, if it's not a nice place to work and if it's gone downhill since I was there, then they need to appoint someone that cares about the show and that cares about the people that work on it.
Well, let's have a quick run through of the kind of day in a life of an OnlyFans creator then, because obviously, you know, like you've said, you're doing photos, but it could be piano lessons, guitar lessons, you're learning how to cook, whatever it may be. So, you know, for anyone out there who's got a skill, who wants to be a creator, you know, what does a day look like? What support do OnlyFans give you? You know, what can the money look like? How long does it take to get paid? Just a top line of all the juicy bits.
So it takes a lot of time and effort because if you want to be successful on that, I think people are paying a subscription, so you have to provide them with content for that subscription. You know, it's like if someone was paying for a service, you have to provide that service, don't you? Personally, I post, so you basically get your wall posts. So I will post 2 wall posts a day and then you can send messages. So then I'll send a message out every evening and with that I'll send locked content. So for me, that might be, so recently I did a really nice photo shoot. I'll send out some of the pictures, then I'll go, if you want the rest of these photos, you unlock it for X amount. That's sort of where you make your money on your messages.
And what can you typically charge?
It depends what the content is. So if I send out 1 picture, I could charge $3 for that. But then if you've got like, obviously 1,000 upwards subscribers and everyone unlocks it, then that's what you're looking at. If I send out a 1-minute behind the scenes video of a photo shoot, I'll charge more for that.
Do you get to see the metrics, as in like what's the typical percentage of people, so of your subscribers that actually pay for stuff?
You do get to see the metrics. I don't know percentage wise what it is, but so basically you can see who's unlocked what. You can see when things have peaked, so you could see there's a certain bit of content you put out and it's done really well. You can see the people like that. You can message people can message you, so you can see like what earnings you've got from your messages, from subscriptions. People can tip you, so that might be, you know, if you put up a picture that someone really likes, they'll drop you a tip. Or I sometimes do like games on there, so I'll do like spin the wheels, so where someone can receive a personal message or unlock some pictures that they've maybe not unlocked, so you can charge per spin, things like that. So it's fun, like you can make it fun. I guess depending on what kind of content you're doing, like it sort of depends on how many followers you've got, how much subscription, everything's sort of dependent on cost. So my subscription is like $15 a month, but someone could charge $3 a month, but then maybe charge more to unlock. So what's brilliant about it is it's your own, like you make it your own and you find your feet once you're on there, and it's different for everyone, I'm sure. Collaborating with people is great. So I've worked with other girls on there, done photo shoots together. That always works really well. So again, like with Instagram, you're getting that cross-reference of audience. And yeah, you then pay a percentage to OnlyFans, so you pay 20%. You can get paid monthly or weekly, or you can get asked to have money withdrawn. It's great. It's great. Honestly, like the thing is for me, it's given me the power to run my own schedule, which I have never ever had. Like,
It's
I've
freedom
always
and
been,
independence, isn't it?
yeah, I can take my little boy to school. I can pick him up from school. I can work around my husband's schedule so he can be in work when he needs to be in work. I can go on holiday and schedule my content for a week so that I don't have to be on my phone. That's done. Like, my job's done for that week. And it's tied into working with brands. Like, I've worked with Ann Summers. I never worked with Ann Summers before, but because now that's sort of like, I guess, my target audience, although my demographic on Instagram is still mainly women, and it's still mainly women sort of like 30 to 50. That's my target audience. And I love that. And I love that the messages that I still get is sort of women going, good on you. Like, you inspire me to be a more confident version of myself. And why the hell shouldn't you do this? Well, that is great.
Well, it's been a wild ride, I guess, over the last 25 plus years, from starting at 14 on a national TV show, and you'd never imagine that, OnlyFans and the internet didn't even exist back then, did it? But I mean, you would never imagine where you've gotten to today. But I mean, if you had to look back to that, 14-year-old self and say, in 25 years' time, I think this is what success looks like, how would you round off and say this is success to me?
I'd standing up for yourself. And I wish I'd done that more. I wish I'd said no more. And one of the great things about doing the platform now is that I can be authentic. I can be unfiltered. So I'd say, yeah, being authentic and being true to yourself is what success is, and it's relatable. That's what people want to see. People can see through falseness, and I think you can't relate to that. You want someone that you can aspire to be, or that can motivate you to feel a certain way in whatever industry that might be. Whoever you look up to in your specific industry. I think that comes from authenticity.
Listen, Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Loved hearing the journey. Loved bringing back some memories of Hollyoaks nights and the 90s and 2000s. Yes. And I hope we can meet and talk again in the future about more of the OnlyFans journey.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.